Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. As you just saw, we have officially kind of put the LT4 back together for the first time, and I think in almost 2 years. It's been quite a while since we've had this whole thing apart. So yeah, we put the supercharger back on, we put the throttle body back on, we put the lid back on, as well as the pulley. Obviously, there's no bolts in any of those, so we're just kind of temporarily putting this thing back together. And the reason we're doing this is because we need to finish mapping out all of our systems. You guys might be wondering, well, what do you mean by that? Well, we've got a number of systems that I don't know how they're going to work together between Global B and the LT4. So Global B is the wire harness that's in the truck. The differences between that and the LT4 motor. There's going to be PCV, fuel system, coolant system, supercharger coolant system, evap fuel purge solenoid. There's some other stuff that I'm kind of thinking about there, but yeah, so I basically kind of needed to put everything together to make sure that we have everything mapped out correctly. And to continue mapping out, we're actually going to put the intake on here as well. This is obviously just the Escalade V stock elbow. It comes out of the supercharger. And I think we should be good to go. So the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be electrical. Obviously, the Silverado Global B never came with a factory supercharger. The fact that there is an Escalade V out there with a factory supercharger helps, but it also doesn't help. So I think how we're going to be tuning this truck is basically as if it had an aftermarket supercharger like a Magnuson. So some of the factory features we will not be able to use because the truck simply isn't wired for it. So with that in mind, what we're going to be doing is we're going to have adapters for the MAF sensor, for the T-map sensor in the back. There's a temperature map sensor here in the back. There's a map sensor here up front. It's right there. And then the other thing we need to worry about is going to be fuel purge solenoid. There's electrical for that. And so the conversion harnesses from LT1 to LT4 should still work. The only thing we might have to worry about are some of the connectors. So with that being said, fuel purge solenoid, let's start there. So the Silverado and the CTS V3, which this blower came off of, both had the purge solenoid here on the driver's side. I think the factory cars that had the LT1, so the C7 Corvette, the 6th gen Camaro, and whatever else had the LT1, I want to say the purge solenoid is over here on the passenger side because they sell a 27-inch long conversion kit that basically moves the plug from the passenger side to the driver's side. I think we're going to be able to get away with no conversion kit needed for the evap fuel purge solenoid because the L87 and the Silverado, as well as the LT4, both have it right here on the driver's side. So I did not buy that harness because I don't think we're going to need it. Now, that plastic PCV hardline for the LT4 and LT5. On the Escalade V, the hardline is over here on the passenger side. It's not on the driver's side. I double checked the GM part numbers and it looks like you can buy the Escalade V hardline, but again, it's for the wrong side of the car because it's going to be over here on the passenger side, not the driver's side. So I think we might be able to go ahead and use the factory piece from the L87, plug it in here on the driver's side, plug in the electrical. I think everything should reach or should be able to be modified, moved around a little bit to reach to where it'll work with the LT4. Now the wiring for the map sensor, T-map, all that stuff is basically going to be different between the L87 and the LT4. So we went ahead and picked up a brand new kit. This is from DSX Motorsports from Dave Steck. And what this is basically a breakout harness and adapter to bolt your LT4 supercharger onto an LT1 car. Before we bought this, I went ahead and double checked the wire count, and the wire count looked the same between the Silverado and the LT4. All right, so I got the kit opened up and we plugged in the T-map sensor here in the back. I'll be honest, I have no idea where this is supposed to go. I need to do some quick research on that, but I also ran the wire up to the front, and then this is about the area where you'd have the MAF splitter basically, and this would run up front. Now I don't know if we'd want to run this wire underneath the supercharger or around it like we have it now, but basically your MAF sensor plug-in would be around here. So I think we've got that partially solved for that harness. The next two parts of the wiring that we're going to have to worry about is going to be the electric water pump. I picked this up from Dedicated Motorsports probably a good 6 to 8 months ago. Matt over there at Dedicated, they occasionally sell low mileage used parts, and this is what they actually had a whole kit for sale for a water pump as well as the electrical harness. I want to say I spent like less than 200 bucks for this, so I got a really good price on it, and it came with the wire harness for it. So this is another thing that we're not going to have to worry about. And how we're going to wire this up is basically we're going to wire it up like the Magnuson supercharger kit. We're going to tie into one of the fuses in the fuse box. You do a tap a fuse and then run that 12 volt switch source. That'll go to this. That'll eventually run down to the water pump down on the frame. And then the last thing we're going to have to worry about electrical is going to be the throttle body. You guys can see, I don't know if I have this throttle body pointed the right way. I think I do, because if I had it pointed upward, I think the wiring could potentially hit the supercharger pulley. So I'm not quite sure exactly where that's going to sit, but I think we're going to need a extension harness for a LT based throttle body, because if you guys looked at this connector down here, that connector is not the same between LS and an LT4. So I think we're going to have to go ahead and look for a throttle body extension for that. I need to add that to my list of things to buy. So we've got one little more thing to buy, but usually those harnesses are like, I don't know, 30, 40 bucks, something like that. So not that big of a deal. And while I was shopping with Matt, I picked up a set of their AN conversion kit for the factory cooling stack, or inner and outer piece, if that's what you want to call it. And these basically will slide over it, and we need to put an E-clip on here. I have some, I just don't have any with me right now. So these two fittings will allow us to convert over to AN line. And like the LS9 supercharger on the Corvette, we will go ahead and get a set of these. I think these are -12. Yeah, -12 fittings, the power grip Gates hoses, as well as some push lock. And I already have some left over of this 3/4 hose. So we'll be pretty much replicating what we have on the Corvette, but on the truck with those fittings from DMS. I just thought of one more electrical piece, and that is going to be the boost control solenoid. It's not exactly what it's called, but basically the valve that opens up inside of the blower. The LT4 has the factory wiring and plug for it, but obviously our Global B truck will not have that wire harness for it. So just like we did on the Chevy SS on the LSA swap, and actually the 2650 that's sitting right next to me, you guys can see this has a Kong Performance valve on here. There's no electrical, it's all just vacuum line based. So I'm pretty sure that's how we're going to take care of that, is basically disconnect the electrical thing. And I think we might have to leave one of these ports open. Now that's throwing back to the SS like almost 8 to 10 years ago. It's been a while, but I think we'll have to leave one of those lines open. I think that sounds about right. So I don't think there's anything we'll have to do with this wiring. We'll just have to remove it and run the vacuum line to the port on the supercharger that's down here. And like I said, I think we'll have to leave one of those lines open. The next system we're going to want to talk about is going to be the catch can and the PCV setup. The way the factory PCV system on the Escalade V works, I'll have a picture of it here, basically takes a hose from both valve covers, it meets in the middle, and then it ties into this one fitting here on the intake. If you run it that way, there is no way you guys can run a catch can. So what I think we're going to do is, and this is kind of what I planned apparently a while ago, I already have the fittings on here. I think how we're going to do it is a little bit different. We're going to run the passenger side valve cover over to the inlet on the supercharger intake. We're going to run the driver's side valve cover, run an extra long hose over to the catch can. The blower snout inlet, we're going to run an extra hose, and we're basically going to be replicating that. We might have to get some longer hoses and stuff, but yeah, I'm pretty sure how that's going to work, because looking at my setup, I can already see that I have you know, the fittings that I'd already ordered for that. That's pretty much going to be the factory setup. If we didn't have a catch can, I would just go ahead and buy the Escalade V piece, but like I said, we do have a catch can, which you're going to want with a direct injection motor, so we're going to do a little bit differently. The next system that we're going to talk about, we've talked a little bit about in the past, is basically going to be the fuel system. So you guys will see I have a new feed line. This is going to come in a feed underneath the supercharger over here on the driver's side. That's the feed line. That is LT4 specific. So if you guys are trying to swap an LT4 into your LT1, buy the line for the LT4, because if I remember reading correctly, it has a larger diameter, and you're going to want that for the LT4 high pressure fuel pump, as well as the injectors. So that feed line will connect to this middle piece. This middle piece will connect to both sides of the fuel rail, and then this other piece will connect, I think, from this piece to the other side fuel rail. So there are 3 pieces on the fuel system that sit underneath the blower. It sits down here in the valley underneath here, and yeah, you should not reuse those, because from what I've read is you want to replace them every time you take the car apart. So we bought all new ones. Now I'm also going to go ahead and buy a set of Escalade V fuel rails, because what I've read is the fuel rails like to get locked in because they're direct injection, and if you start pulling on them, they could potentially rip and tear things, and you don't want to mess with it. So we've got 23,000 some miles on the truck, and I don't know when this whole setup will be going in the truck, but so yeah, we've definitely got, they're approaching almost 4-year-old fuel rails, and they're not super expensive. They're like about $100 a side. So I'm gonna go ahead, buy the new fuel rails. We already have the LT4 fuel injectors. We've showed you that in the past. And then the last thing, which I still haven't bought, is the LT4 high pressure fuel pump. I'll have a picture of that here. Going average price on those is like $850, $900, something like that. So that's kind of why I've been holding off on that. But I do eventually need to buy that. I have contacted a guy over on HP Tuners. I think he has got a 2019 that he swapped in LT4 high pressure fuel pump and fuel rails and this whole setup. Maybe he has a Whipple. I forget exactly what supercharger he has, but I think he has all the LT4 injectors, high pressure fuel pump, rails, all that stuff. What he told me was basically how you get that LT4 to work with the L87, basically the Global B, is there's a solenoid on the back of the high pressure fuel pump that we're going to have to remove, and we're going to have to swap that solenoid from our L87 to the LT4 high pressure fuel pump. That way the fuel pump has the right inputs and the right, basically the hard numbers in HP Tuners, because I think those pumps run on a very small spectrum, and the LT4 and the L87, they're just not close enough to where you can run it. So you have to swap that part, that solenoid, from the L87 onto the LT4 fuel pump assembly, and you should be good to go. So that is something we're gonna have to do. And I also read that there's might be a pin that you need to file off on either the L87 solenoid or the LT4 high pressure fuel pump. There was some mention of it that over some time on the design change, there was a pin that prevents the L87 solenoid from fitting on the LT4. But if you get rid of that pin, I think it's plug and play. So we'll show that in the future, obviously. I just wanted you to be aware of it. Oh, and one more thing about the fuel system. You're gonna wanna swap the fuel pump, the in-tank fuel pump, from the L87 to the LT4 Escalade V fuel pump. I think they're about $130, and I mean, they're not super hard to get out of the truck. I am not taking my bed off. I refuse to do that, but not super hard to take off. But that is something you should be aware of. You are going to have to drop the fuel tank, swap that pump out for the LT4 one, because the Escalade V, you know, the LT4 high pressure fuel pump, the injectors, they have a higher demand, and they designed that stock fuel pump to provide that demand. The stock L87, which only makes 400 horsepower versus like 700. And the last system that we're going to talk about today is going to be the cooler for the supercharger, so the coolant system for that. And we've already talked about it a little bit. We got the DMS fittings on the blower. We've got the electric water pump right there. And basically how that stuff's all going to connect, we'll show you a diagram here, is we're going to have on the outlet of the blower, that is going to go to the factory Escalade V reservoir. That reservoir has a hole in the bottom of it. That hose will go down to the inlet of the water pump, and then the output of that will go over to the high side of the radiator heat exchanger for the whole setup. And then the low side, the lower fitting, will feed back into the supercharger and come back here as the inlet piece. So we're gonna have some factory stuff, we're gonna have some modified stuff, but I think we should all make it work together. And the nice part of this is, since we're using parts from different cars, and if you guys looked at that diagram, that was actually an LT4 out of a Z06, and then the truck diagram I pulled off an Escalade V. The nice part of this is most of it's all GM stuff, so none of this stuff was super expensive, and it's not going to have to be super custom. The only thing we might need to do is pick up some 90s in that silicone hose. That might be the only thing we need to do, is pick up some connectors and some 90-degree fittings. One thing that just occurred to me when I was doing all that explanation, the LT4 has, this is for the brake booster. We're going to be using it for the catch can. The Global B on the trucks has electric brakes. It does not have a brake booster in the traditional vacuum hose going from the supercharger to the brake booster. It's all electric on the truck. Wanted you guys to be aware of that, because that's just something people forget sometimes. All right guys, for the TMAP wiring and this breakout harness, I just went to the truck and started unplugging things and tried to plug things in. And yeah, none of these connectors are the same. So I shouldn't be shocked, because it is GM and they like to do things difficult. And yeah, so I've got a couple pictures here. Here's a picture of the MAF sensor. That harness is completely different from that picture compared to this. This has like 7 or 8 wires in it. The wire on the truck only has like 5. And the second problem is the MAP sensor. The MAP sensor on the LT1 Camaro and Corvette is in the back. It's on the back of the manifold. Well, on the truck, it's right here. It's up front. So yeah, that isn't going to work either. And not only that, but if you guys take a look at this picture here, the connector is also different. So this connector won't plug into the factory truck engine harness, because these are physically different. So yeah, we've got a number of things to figure out, and I'm glad we did this video. That way, you know, we can try to figure this stuff out. But I will say this, if you guys have any knowledge on the LT4 swap on a Global B, let me know, because everything that I've seen documented online has been for maybe 2019, maybe 2020, before they went to the Global B. And yeah, so those things are all like plug and play. This, the wiring is not. The physical stuff, yeah, this will all bolt on. That should be pretty easy. But yeah, the wiring stuff, we're gonna need to figure out. Now, we do have one option that I know of, and that would be to buy the wire harness from Magnuson. Obviously, the Magnuson and the LT4 are not the same supercharger. And actually, the Magnuson, the 2650, uses an old IET sensor like this that they have molded into, you know, the casting for that supercharger. Unfortunately, on an LT4, it doesn't have that. It just has that TMAP sensor in the back. Maybe we can find some kind of conversion from TMAP to that IET sensor like that, and order that harness from Magnuson. That might be end up what we need to do. I'm thinking if we do go that route, it'll probably have the correct location for the front map sensor, you know, instead of being back, it being in the front. It'll have the correct breakout for the map sensor here, you know, the one on the airbox, because that's going to be different. And really the only thing we would have to do is basically cut that Magnuson harness, run it wherever we need it to go for that IAT sensor, and potentially what we could do is remove this sensor and see if there's a plug and play IAT sensor, and see if they would fit in this hole back here, because this is after the boost, after the intercooler, and so that is where we would want to fit our IAT sensor information from. But yeah, if you guys do have any information on Global B and trying to get this stuff working, please let me know. And so yeah, that is pretty much going to be it for mapping out all the subsystems on this swap. It's not something that I had really taken the full time to like kind of detail and make a parts list and everything that we're going to need. I had bits and pieces of it, but I'd never like kind of sat down and thought about the whole setup and all the subsystems and all that. But you know, we made some discoveries like fuel purge solenoid that looks like it's going to be plug and play. Everything else looks like it should be a pretty easy swap. Obviously, there's some other things we're gonna need to figure out, but I will say one thing that's a good saving grace is Magnuson in their 2650 kit, they have their installation manuals online, and I downloaded that. So that kind of gave us a good starting point on this whole research, and kind of led us down to where, you know, the decisions that we've made, parts that we've ordered, and the cooling system, especially the wiring for this little electric pump, shouldn't be that big of a deal. And so yeah, that is gonna be it for today's video. If you guys like this update, hit that like button. If you guys wanna follow along with the progress on this LT4 swap, the build out, the wiring, the cooling, all those subsystems, hit that subscribe button, turn on your bell notifications. If you guys wanna help support the channel, check out all the links down below. I will make sure to include links to everything that we've picked up today. I think you can buy some of the stuff on Amazon. We'll include links for that. Also, I'll eventually be putting a document together like I did for the SS LSA swap. I'm gonna have a Global B LT4 swap. Very similar document that we created there. I'll have that linked when we create it. And also make sure you check our website, BonecrrusherSS.com. We got plenty of used C6 parts still on there. We don't really have any LS9 parts, but we'll have plenty of C6 parts on there. We got t-shirts, hats, stickers, all that good stuff. Check that out, and that's gonna be it. Thanks, guys. Have a great one.